Hey guys, what's up? So in this video I will try to give you some basic fundamentals of fighting on Albion. Mainly this is mainly for my guild members that will be joining me to the EU server, as well as any new players that will potentially join us in the guild, as well as anyone else that could benefit from it, which is why I'm gonna just post it on YouTube. Bear in mind, I've not really done any guide videos before, but I have been asked a few times to make some guide videos, as well as just questions around our comp. So starting with the comp, we tend to try and specialize on a kite comp, a front to back comp. So our purpose is to focus on attacking any enemy that is pushing into our backline, any enemy that we can see coming into our backline, or just in the front of the enemy's line. So normally that's usually tanks in the front line, so we would try to put some pressure by adding Q stacks, by adding fire stacks, by adding bleed stacks on the tanks, getting them a little bit low, make them rethink trying to push into us. But other times it will be melee DPS like Carvin, like a Halberd, like a Hellfire, who is trying to be cheeky enough to push into us. Even Kingmakers, other ones that require some kind of stacking to try and get into us. So those are our priority. Now, our comp usually consists of 2 tanks. Normally we have 1 engaged tank and 1 def tank, and the def tank is usually heavy mace. Other times we would have bedrock and grey hammer, and other times we would have just heavy mace and bedrock, and we would not really have an engaged tank. It just depends on who applies for the content, and like what roles we think they're going to be good at. So ideally, we prefer, especially earlier on, we prefer some kind of engaged tank. Sometimes it's a golem stuff, but we found that grey hammer works well, as it can be used both defensively and offensively. In terms of damage, we usually have 4 DPS. The priority is in this order: Curse Skull, one-handed and fire, whether it's wildfire and dawnsong. These are key weapons that we always need. And then the third important one is either having a halberd or a carrying caller. The fourth one would be Hellfire. Now there's been a bit of debate around having these weapons, the halberd and carrying caller, whether we switch it with like a longbow, a great thrust, whether we switch it with something completely different like a fist of Ava. We are still considering, and we'll be testing out a few things in EU, but for now we will keep it. The reason why we're keeping these is due to the fact that we can, again, like as I mentioned, curse can apply curse stacks, fire can apply the fire pressure, and axe can apply the bleed pressure. And then you have your Hellfire that has the anti-heal, and it usually goes really well. And then it usually kind of makes it impossible for teams to try and reset with having an anti-heal from here, anti-heal from the Hood of Tenacity, and then all the other pressure from the rest of the DPS. Healer is usually Hollowfall, but we also have Blight as an option. Now anyone in here that you see with Assassin Hood, more often than not, these are just cleansed, so these could be any leather helmet. Depending on who we fight, if we are fighting another comp that is more kitey comp, or more of a one-shot kite comp, then we would consider having fire on meditation, we would consider having Hellfire on meditation, and potentially just keeping healer as cleanse. And then also, if it's dependent on the situation, if it's a very hard kite comp, then we would have our halberd or carrying caller having cleanse on helmet, and then having battle rush on their W. Outside of that, they would go with internal bleeding on W. So there is a bit of configuration that we can tweak on Qs and on Ws and some of the helmet ability. For boots, it's always use boot defensively. Unless you're a melee DPS and you think you can execute a target that is low and you have enough defensives that you are not gonna be caught and killed, and you are aware that the healer will not get out of position. As long as you are comfortable in going in and coming out, then melee DPS has my permission to push in and using their boots offensively to get the kill. Especially with the Hellfire. Hellfire would have extra get away, extra sustain. They'll have cleanse helmet to get out from like being rooted. They'll have their W and Q as mobility. So Hellfire would be a good one to go in, execute a target, and come back safely. I do not want to go into details with some of the other specifics, but usually Bedrock is used to help push enemies out, help us kite, especially if it's outnumbered. Trying to just, as long as they do not have multiple Night Helmets, then this is perfect. And even if they do, then it would be a thing where whenever we see them on Night Helmet, Heavy Mace and Bedrock would work together. Heavy Mace snare charges in and purges the Night Helmet. Bedrock immediately drops the E and makes it hard for them to push into us. Now, all our range players, both Curse, Fire and Healer, would be on Face Care Rub. The priority for this is to use it for Firewall, to help us build a bigger gap from the opponent when they are trying to push into us. Our first Firewall will be coming from the Fire W, the Firewall from the Fire Mage W, and then the second one would be from the Curse Skill Face Skill Rub. The third one would be from the Face Skill Rub from the Fire. And the fourth one would ideally be the Firewall W, but if not, then the healer would have the Face Skill ready. But I normally want the healer to only use the Face Skill as an emergency if all our defensives have been broken and our tanks were not able to slow them down. Then the healer would need to pop their Face Skill Rub. Normally, it's always good to have healer using their Face Skill Rub as the second ability in their Face Skill Rub, because more often than not, enemies will be pushing in with Stalker Jacket or Hellion Jacket or some sort of ability like a Great Axe E, where we can just lock them down in one spot and then we can add more pressure into them. But as mentioned, they can also use it for Firewall. The reason why we have too many cleanses and helmet is so that we are super slippery, especially for the range DPS. We need to be, anytime we get locked down, we need to be able to immediately cleanse out of any CC, root, silence, and be able to just dash out of it or pop a firewall and then just walk out of it. We really need to be like as slippery as possible in these type of situations, because we normally see ourselves in a situation where even though we are in the road, we find ourselves in a situation where we are outnumbered. So it's always good to be able to get out from multiple type of lockdowns. So that's the main things to mention. In terms of the halberd, one thing that some players forget to do. I always need my halberd near the tanks, not on top of the tanks, not ahead of them, not even on the same line as them more often, but maybe a step or two behind them, ready to always like stack up bleed on any target that is nearby, whether it's a carving or another tank or enemy tanks or whatever. Like the halberd job is to try and go in and stack up. As long as they're ready to get out from their booths, as long as they're ready to boot out, as long as they're ready to use the resist pot if they're getting engaged on, then absolutely, like tanks and then absolutely halberd should always be ready to apply pressure before an engage, and at the very least the halberd needs to be ready nearby the engaged tank when he's about to do the countdown, so that it can go in and apply its pressure as soon as possible. Range DPS will be able to hit from a distance. Hellfire can also hit from somewhat of a distance, and it has mobility to build a gap. Yeah, so other than that, it's all about just applying pressure depending on the scenario. Let's see if we can find any type of clips. For us, it's all about adding pressure as much as possible. So depending on the scenario, we need to always be ready to listen to calls. Always make sure you're ready to engage as a DPS. Always make sure, more often than not, like we will always have a crown on the engaged tank. So as a DPS, never be out of screen too far out that you could not see the crown, even if you are ranged DPS. In terms of halberd, as long as you are in a good position that you can apply pressure, add your stacks and then kite, then absolutely you're fine to be positioned how you think is right. Just try not to go too far out. And yeah, like it's all about keeping your composure. Even if you see we're getting sandwiched, always make sure you listen to calls, you kite to the direction you need to kite as a team. You do not get tunnel vision. And in this scenario, we were getting ambushed by the skilled from both sides, so southeast and northwest. And we decided we're gonna go through them, so we're gonna go northwest. But at the same time, we were just gonna make sure we put our dev tanks. We're gonna make sure we were gonna put enough CC on them that they are not gonna try and outpace us. But we managed to get out from this situation, which was sticky. But straight after that, we decided to engage. Unfortunately for us, an Oathkeeper E was popped here, so it did absorb some damage, but we still managed to pop one of them. And now one of our face scale, again, we're very slippery as mentioned, pushed them back, so it's kind of got them out of position. And now they're pushing in, but it has been hard for them. Even with Night Helmet, they would struggle with that. So that's as far as I clipped it. Let me see here if there's another useful comp. This is we were practicing. We normally don't play massively outnumbered fights. We normally don't play more than 7, as we focus usually on roads. But from time to time there is content in our zone, so we would bring some more of our guild members. Our kite comp doesn't. Our current version of the kite comp doesn't scale too well with more. Like it doesn't scale too well with 15v15 or 20v20, so we need to look into like how to best scale it or how to change it. Normally in a 15 versus 15, I think it's always better to do more of a one-shot comp, and anything more than like 9-10 people, I think it's always better to go one-shot comp. Due to the nature of the amount of defensives the enemy will have, the amount of Night Helmet the enemy will have, the amount of CC the enemy could have, so it will make our it will make it harder for us. So I guess few things in here, like in terms of a dev tank, as mentioned in previously, always make sure as a dev tank you're watching out when the enemy is about to engage, always keeping an eye on a couple of people at the very least, like especially on the 7v7. Always make sure that you are stopping engages. If I make a call of, or any of our tanks makes a call to kite, that does not mean for our dev tanks to also kite. It means range DPS, a healer to reposition themselves safely, but then we need to kite, but not kite on top of our enemy and on top of our teammates. And we also need to make sure we kite appropriately, meaning that we're watching as we're moving. We're constantly watching and to stop their engages. So in this situation, like in here, you can already see that enemy was already trying to engage by just watching that this guy the perma sprinting. So our heavy myth already snare charged them, but I've also like E'd. But you can see the spirit hunter already gone in, but we managed to stop their carving and their perma from doing any damage. So you're constantly watching like what they're doing. Usually the best one is when the perma goes purple mode, I think, from the rope's color rope. You need to watch out for that. If you see the carving using the E, in some situation you immediately need to stop the enemy. When you see the air compressor from a tank, you need to be ready to stop that. So as you see the air compressor coming in from here, you gotta stop the engage. So in here, in this example, I can see on the edge of my screen an air compressor, so the engaged tank is pushing in. So, and the perma's gone purple mode. So in here, all I could do is just at that point stop the following DPSs from pushing in. And yeah, I mean, other than that, like that's what I expect my tanks to do. Again, I think there might be another example. So another example is around here. As a dev tank, as long as you see, like we were kiting, we were kind of in a vulnerable spot here, clumped up. So you can see them popping night helmets, and as you can see the heavy mace already sprinting, and I can see that we're a bit, we are slightly in a bad spot here. So as a tank, you do not want to go back and try and get out from the engage. You want to go forward as long as you have your defensives and stop some of the engages. So like here, managed to absorb a decent amount of engage from the enemy, and then we were able to counter. Not as good as we should have, but as mentioned, we were practicing here. We had few people who were not comfortable playing like with a larger number, and our synchronization this day was not great. Our DPS this day were not doing a great job. Again, they're about to do an engage. As a dev tank, you're always watching for any kind of indication that they're about to engage. In here, you know, they haven't done an engage for a while. Tank is running in for an air compress. He pops his air compress, but all of these guys have been stopped from some sort of engage, or at least delayed from the engage until our teammates have pushed out. So that's what I would always expect from my tanks. In terms of DPS, always make sure you are near enough the tank. Range DPS should be about 4 steps behind, so roughly where Oink is and where Grotum is at this point. Melee DPS should be a bit more closer, just so when I'm doing a countdown they're ready to push in. So in here, as we engage, this was slightly slower engage, but basically that's what it should be. Like we need to, as I'm doing here, I'm counting down 3, so around here 3, 2, 1. So at this point, Pierce should have already gone in, and every other damage should have already gone in. Like this was a slower engage, from everyone. So the way to improve on that is always wait, always be ready. As soon as you hear the engage tank count in 3, you're ready to engage. You always have to be positioning yourself well. More often than not, we will always say we're looking, we're gonna engage in 3, 2, and then by 1, Pierce needs to go. And as soon as like that goes in, as soon as you see the Pierce, damage needs to follow. Like I always say, like as soon as you hear 1, basically everyone should already be dropping their damage, because Pierce is like an instant hit, whereas Hellfire, Dawn Song, or even Wildfire, and even Halberd positioning stuff, like it takes a second as well to like initiate it. So as soon as you hear 1, if Hellfire starts initiating the E, Dawn Song and Wildfire, it starts initiating the E. By the time they land their E, the Pierce has already been dropped, as long as the person who plays Pierce does it in a timely manner. I think that covers, as mentioned, I do not want to go too deep into this one, so I think that covers the majority of what we spoke about, what I wanted to go through in this comp. Ideally, I will be working on more of a brawly comp, but the second thing to talk about is the early game comp. So I'm gonna whiz through the early game comp. So this comp is designed for when we move to EU server and we do not have any of the artifact weapons. This comp will help us early stage with in the road. There might be a couple of tweaks we will do, but all these weapons are fairly easy to craft, fairly easy to get a hold of. The only exception is that we would ideally like to have a druid count for mana, but if not, we will have all our players have scholar count for mana regen. The other thing is, since we do not have face scale robes, we're going to be on cleric robe, so potentially one we will have, instead of a halberd or great frost, we will have another fire, so we'll have 2 fires with rotating firewalls. Although we're hoping we don't need to worry too much about that at the early stage, as long as we have a great hammer and a heavy mace, but eventually we will just have to see how things will play out. Again, alternatively, we could even maybe just work with 1 tank and 5 DPS, with the 5th DPS being another fire. And also obviously Hollowfall will not be a thing for a while, and we will just have to try and make do with a Great Holy or One-Handed Nature, depending on who plays what. We will not have any good capes, so we will just have the normal capes for a bit, and then we will advance into having Limb and Martlock cape. Bear in mind, these are not expected to be tier 8 weapons. These early stage will be 4-1, 4-2, so this is just for the visual point of view. Same with the food. Initially we might not even have any food or potion. Later on it will be the tier 3, tier 5, tier 7 food, or the tier 8 food, depending on which one. And similar with the potion, 3, 5, 7 boozy spot. Yeah, so this will be our comp. It will be similar situation where you pierce with your demonic. Demonic E is good for kiting as well, and then fire, halberd, great frost, or even longbow will be the ones applying the damage after the great hammer engages on the target. So this will be an interesting comp in the road, and I'm looking forward to getting some clips early stage to showcase this comp. Cool. Alright, so I think this covers everything. We will definitely be working on, as a guild in EU, instead of just purely road, we will put some time to do black zone outposts, potentially black zone raiding terries due to the foundation update. We will also look into early stage to potentially, but I don't think we will, depending on the situation. We will look into castles as well. Other than that, we will be doing a bunch of econ. So if you're looking forward to some kind of econ guide, I'm not really an econ player, but I have worked on some sort of guide somewhere. Let me try and find. So this is a Trello board. Tend to use it as a way for my work, as a way to organize my workload. But I found that it could be somewhat useful for myself in terms of breaking down the task that is needed for EU econ. So on this one, just a quick one, even though we're not probably planning to do bags anymore, this is the plan. The plan is to make bags and craft gathering tools. Now the objective, if we were gonna go for bags, is to gather hide and fiber. So ideally you want to have multiple targets, multiple members to gather fiber and hide, but you want to have 2 dedicated players who ideally begins from April 23 or April 24, 5-day early access, who will just gather. So if we can have a fiber gatherer and a hide gatherer, basically no life in the gathering mode, then we would then have an alt account probably, but we would have a second account who would be the refiner for fiber and hide. Now fiber and hide will have 2 different locations. Fiber would be in Limhurst and hide will be in Martlock. And then we would need someone to manage islands. We will be needing someone to help craft tools, because you only have limited amount of learning points. You would need different people to do different things. The refinement, you need a different account because you need to use a learning point for those. You want the island, you need someone to use focus points, but also you just need one dedicated person to go in, level it up, grow whatever they need to grow, and and then we can work into getting some oxys and food for the station. But this is digressing from the actual topic, but the initial plan is to make X amount of silver, probably more than 10 million silver. We want to get a refining station in Martlock, a refining station in Limhurst, a crafting station in a particular city to craft bags and whatever, and then at the same time we're looking at breeding mounds and crafting food for the station, and then buying a guild and reserving our name, as well as getting a guild island where we can drop all the gathered materials, and then having certain person or people to help transport from the gathered materials to the refiners, and then from the refiners to the crafters, and then from the crafters to the black market. And again, all of that takes time, and there's other steps that I'm skipping through that we kind of need to figure out as a team. But since I'm not an econ player, I will be working with some of my members who probably know a lot more than me, but this was more for me to just get my heads around it. If you think going through this on a clip might be helpful for you, either as a solo player or as a guild or as a small group, just let me know. I can make another video and go through this. But since this is getting super late now, I will try and wrap it up. Thank you all for watching the video and getting this far. Hopefully I will try and post this as soon as possible, and then I'll catch you guys probably in closed beta. Alright, thank you, see you.